Welcome to Wisdom from the Word. Bible Fellowship Church is a family of believers who want to help others discover and strengthen their relationship with Jesus Christ. And we're praying this message helps you strengthen your walk with Him. Now let's dive in.
Good morning. Welcome to Wisdom from the Word. This morning I would like to just talk from a passage in the first part of Proverbs. The first 9 chapters of Proverbs are dominated with a picture of wisdom, which is calling out to us. And while many topics are brought up in this section, one that is repeated is a message on moral integrity, especially in regard to marriage. Many word pictures are used to get the point across. In chapter 7, Solomon recounts what he saw as he was looking out the window of his house one day. And in verse 7, he said he saw a naive young man, a young man who, quote, lacked wisdom, end quote. It's twilight. A young man gets enticed by this adulterous woman. He describes all the things that she does and says to him to go along with him. And then we read this in verses 21 and 22, Proverbs chapter 7, 21, 22. She persuaded him with persuasive words. With her smooth talk, she compelled him. Suddenly he went after her. Like an ox goes to the slaughter, like a snag prancing into this trapper's snare. And this picture is very, very striking, as so often happens. I have my own mental picture of this ox going to the slaughter. I grew up on a cattle farm in southwest Minnesota. My father had about 120 head of cattle that he would feed out for the market, and he would buy them from western South Dakota. Now, these yearlings would come from the grasslands out in western South Dakota, and they thought they had a nice life with grass to eat and lots of room to roam around. But one day they would get rounded up and brought to a crowded pen, and then they would be loaded onto a truck and shipped to another crowded yard. And then there they got herded around, and at one point they found themselves in a noisy arena with a whole bunch of people around, and there was this one guy who was kind of going in a sing-song voice, calling out to people, and people in the stands would sometimes yell at him, and then they got pushed back and got on another crowded truck, and then they headed down Interstate 90 east out of South Dakota to Minnesota. Finally, after a few hours on this crowded truck, they would arrive at my dad's farm. And they got unloaded. They got into this kind of spacious yard, but there was no grass in it. And so the farmer brought out some hay for them to eat, and it was a little different than the grass they were used to, but it was pretty good. And they were still kind of hungry. And then pretty soon the farmer would come out with his tractor and his wagon, and he drove it into the yard, and he parked it next to this really tall building, big, tall, white concrete building, and then it made some noise, and then pretty soon he got back on his tractor and he drove it around and came to these feeding bunks, and then the wagon started making some noise, and out comes this green stuff, and so they come by and they kind of look at it and they kind of sniff at it, and it tastes different than anything they had. The farmer called it silage, but they got used to it. It was kind of good, actually. And in fact, they got to really like it. Now, it was nice for these cattle. They didn't even have to bend their necks because these bunks are way up in the air, like they wouldn't eat grass. So it was really alive. Life was just great. They could have all they wanted to eat, and they could just goof around all day, and they got fed twice a day. In fact, they started growing. They gained over 2 pounds a day. And the farmer and his 2 boys, about once a week, would get some nice clean straw out of the big barn and lay it down, so they had a nice place to sleep. So life was good. They had some nice clean water drink. They didn't have to drink any water out of a stale pond. It was really great. But one day in the late summer, the farmer and his two sons would come out and they would chase the cattle into the next yard, which is a little smaller. And some of the cattle got to go back to the big yard and some of them went off to the barn. And then once again, a truck came and the cattle got loaded into it. And they would be wondering, where are we going now? Last time we took a trip, it was really a good deal. We got to see this farmer and he fed us good. And, life was easy and good, lots of food, no work, just goof off all day. Maybe we're going to even go to a better place. And the truck moves and goes down the road. When I read this verse in Proverbs, this is the picture that comes to my mind. This helps me to keep listening to how He is telling me to live. I do not want to be like those cattle just going off to this big factory building down the road, never to come out alive. God often uses the picture of marriage in a relationship to Him. Many of the prophets use it, and the story of the prophet Hosea is a very vivid illustration of using the marriage example in our relationship with God. Just like He wants us to keep our marriages with integrity, we need to keep our relationship with Him with a pure devotion. We can't let anything else entice us. There's nothing around, there's a lot around, I should say. There's a lot around that is drawing us away from living a moral life. There are all kinds of assaults on marriage today, and there are also all kinds of assaults on our relationship with God. Do not let the pervasive words of her smooth talk compel you to go down that road. Don't be like that naive young man. Whatever the incitement is, whether it's sex or wealth, pleasure, prestige, power, it will only fatten you up for the slaughter. Keep walking with Him. Have a good day.
Thank you for joining us for Wisdom in the Word. If you're looking for additional resources to help strengthen your walk with Jesus Christ, visit bfcsebring.com or download our mobile app.